Luckily for you, The Great Gatsby doesn't have a lot of characters to keep track of. Think of the cast as 6 plus 1. Ready? Let's start with the big 6. You've got Nick the narrator, Daisy his cousin, Tom, Daisy's husband, and Myrtle, Tom's lover. There's also Jordan Baker, Tom and Daisy's friend and Nick's girlfriend, and Jay Gatsby, the wealthy, mysterious bootlegger and Daisy's lover, after whom the book is named. As for that plus 1, here's the piece that will make you look like a genius when you drop this thought bomb in class. There's a 7th character who looms even larger than the larger-than-life Gatsby. That character is the era itself, the 1920s. The 1920s actually define this book. At the beginning of the story, the 1920s present the promise of unending prosperity. By the end of the book, the same decade presents a picture of unending despair. Nick and Gatsby walk this path from ignorant bliss to, well, in Gatsby's case, the grave. And leading them all the way, the book's most powerful seductress, the 1920s. That's a character, all right, just not one I'd invite to my party. I said Gatsby was a ghost story, but not just for the characters, for Fitzgerald, too. More on Fitzgerald's ghosts right after. Gatsby is haunted by Daisy. Haunted by his obsession with Daisy and everything she represents. Nick is haunted by Gatsby, haunted by his obsession with Gatsby and everything he represents. But there's a bigger haunting at work here, the hidden struggle behind the ghost story. In the last chapter, Nick says, "After Gatsby's death, the East was haunted for me." Fitzgerald struggled to come to terms with the 1920s. The excesses of those times seemed to haunt him the way the East haunted Nick. So this book of his, was it a search for redemption? And did he find it? If you were about to answer, yes, yes, you may be a hopeless romantic, or you may not have read the book. Or you may have missed the book's last line, the one that reads, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." 15 years after Gatsby's publication, they carved those words on the author's tombstone. Say what you will about Fitzgerald, just don't say, "and he lived happily ever after." Stick around for an all-American ghost story. Our story starts with an eerie green light and a pair of eyes, huge, knowing eyes that watch and wait. There's a man who's being haunted, too, haunted by the ghost of a girl he loved but couldn't have. She haunts him, he hunts her. He tries to conjure her through lavish, excessive parties. He sees her in each one of his dozens and dozens and dozens of expensive tailored shirts. And when he can't have her, well, what would you do? What would you do to try and reclaim a ghost? Become a ghost yourself? That's what you do if you're Gatsby, though not by choice exactly, because Gatsby dies by someone else's hand, not by his own. A fitting end to a ghost story, don't you think? It's also the fitting beginning to one, because you could say that The Great Gatsby begins when the hunter becomes the haunter. Whenever Fitzgerald makes a point of the weather, pay attention. There's more brewing than just a few storm clouds. Okay. Chapter 5. Gatsby has wrangled Nick into staging a reunion with his obsession, Daisy. He's been scheming to win back her heart, and now, on this dark and stormy afternoon, he plots to rekindle their love during tea at Nick's house. Fitzgerald chooses dreary pouring rain as the accompaniment to Gatsby's ploy. Gatsby and Daisy were about to begin an affair that would lead to doom and to Gatsby's death. Once again, Fitzgerald wants to be sure that we don't miss the point. It's this kind of deliberation that makes weather one of the motifs in The Great Gatsby. It consistently helps emphasize the emotional atmosphere or tone in the book. So, when Daisy's husband Tom confronts Gatsby about Gatsby's affair with his wife, it's a swelteringly hot day. All the better to convey a sense of discomfort. And when Gatsby is killed, the summer is over, it's the first day of autumn. In other words, time has moved on and the past can't be recaptured. I wonder what Fitzgerald would make of global warming. When the hunter becomes the haunter. And do you think my eyes should come up after I say the haunter? Haunter. The haunter.
More head.
More head? Okay. Haunter. When the hunter becomes the haunter. Saturday night, sorry, I forgot what my line was, so I was like, wait, what? Saturday night at Gatsby's. I almost...
Party one. Let's just do a safety.
Okay.
So we got it.
Safety blow.
Yeah.
This thing slipped. I see little feathers floating down. Thursday afternoon with Tom and his mistress Myrtle. Setting, the apartment Tom keeps for the affair where things often get out of hand. Setting, the apartment Tom keeps for the affair, and I can't get this unhooked! Okay, where am I tossing this thing? Over there? The apartment Tom keeps for the affair where things often... He loves it. He loves it not. He loves it. He loves it not. Being rich, handsome, and drunk. 60 seconds about a man of two minds. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby could have been an assignment straight from a creative writing class. You know, write what you know. Here's what Fitzgerald knew. He knew the lure of the ladies. He knew wild parties and soaring prosperity. And he knew the emptiness of it all, the debauchery and the decadence, the booze and the bootleggers. He knew the emptiness of it all, and he wrote about it. That book is The Great Gatsby. I'm not saying that Gatsby is an autobiography. It's not really even about any one person so much as it is about an era, about the 1920s and Fitzgerald's, well, conflicting feelings about that time period. You know the saying, all that glitters isn't gold? That's The Great Gatsby in a sentence. So why did it take Fitzgerald 180 pages to get there? The answer is coming up next. Think you like to party? The Great Gatsby is one booze fest after another. Here's the plot as seen through Nick Carraway's social calendar, coming up next. Party 1! Saturday night at Gatsby's. Nick, the new neighbor, just wants in. Party 2. Monday lunch with Nick's cousin Daisy and her husband Tom. They mutter about Gatsby. Nick still wants in. Party 3. Thursday afternoon with Tom and his mistress Myrtle. Setting, the apartment Tom keeps for the affair where things often get out of hand. Party 4. Saturday night at Gatsby's. Nick's in. He finds out that Gatsby and Daisy have a past. How interesting. Party 5. Nick invites Gatsby and Daisy to his place for tea and intrigue. Gatsby and Daisy begin an affair. Party 6. Tom confronts Gatsby at the Plaza Hotel about Gatsby's affair with Daisy. Gatsby and Daisy mix it up with a hit and run that kills Myrtle. Party 7. Back at Gatsby's spread. No revelers, just a funeral. For Gatsby, murdered by Myrtle's husband. It's called The Great Gatsby, but Gatsby doesn't do much until halfway through the book. There's a guy called Nick from page 1, but he doesn't do much until Gatsby sucks him in. So who's driving this story anyway? The answer, coming up. Most every story is about someone, right? Normal people call that someone the main character. English teachers say the protagonist. Whatever. He or she is the one you follow from beginning to end and watch them grow. This is where The Great Gatsby is unusual. A lot of people will say Nick Carraway is the protagonist, and that's mostly true. Okay, you watch him from start to finish. You watch him change as he sees the materialism and excesses of the 1920s for what they really are. By the end of the book, he wants nothing to do with it all. You might say he started to learn values, but Nick's an observer, and the action of the book really develops around what Gatsby wants. His journey to get Daisy back and to prove that he's a man. Remove Gatsby and you don't have much of a story. In other words, for the first half of the story, you don't have much of a story. What you have is the emptiness of the 1920s. Check out Recap 4 to see what Fitzgerald does with that. I'm not inside F. Scott Fitzgerald's head, but reading The Great Gatsby made me think that Fitzgerald wanted to be sure that his readers got the message. What message? More on that in a moment. The Valley of Ashes. It's here that Gatsby's car, driven by Daisy, kills Myrtle, and it's because of what happens here that Myrtle's husband kills Gatsby. Leave it to Fitzgerald to make sure we didn't miss the point. The uninhibited pursuit of pleasure leads you down the wrong road. Literally, down the wrong road. The Valley of Ashes is not the kind of place anyone like Gatsby would want to go to. It's a stretch of desolation between New York City and West Egg, and it's called the Valley of Ashes because it's the place where the city dumps its industrial ashes. And not just ashes like the stuff left over from a fire. It's the dumping ground for people, too. People who never made it into those upper levels of society. Think of it this way. Ashes equal decay, desolation, waste. And the Valley of Ashes? The bad end that awaits a society in reckless pursuit of all the wrong things. Materialism, wealth, carnal indulgences. Don't say Fitzgerald didn't warn. Question. Did the face of God make an appearance on a faded highway billboard? Or was Fitzgerald just drinking again? The answer after this. In case you forgot, Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's eyes are the ones with the glasses. The ones that are painted on the billboard that looks out over the Valley of Ashes. Now there's a symbol. After Daisy plows Gatsby's car into Myrtle, husband George decides that Dr. Eckelberg's painted eyes are the eyes of God, watching and judging us all. Poor George sees God where others would see an optometrist ad. Now for the mystery. Eckelberg's eyes represent the only suggestion of religious anything in the entire story. And George is the only person to catch a glimpse of something that can remotely be described as symbolic. So, was George the only one who wasn't so blinded by the excesses of the age that he could glimpse the divine? Or was George simply the kind of desperate soul who's vulnerable to religious hallucinations? Who cares? George is a fictitious character. I think Fitzgerald invoked God to support his own judgment over the excesses of the era. Say what you will for F. Scott, the man wasn't shy about his opinions.